Welcome, fellow travelers. This is Cosmic Wanderers, a space where we explore the universe within and beyond.
Here, we'll navigate the mysteries of existence, uncover ancient wisdom, and dive into stories that spark wonder and connection. I'm Nova, but everyone knows me as No-No. I will be your guide on this journey through the cosmos of thought, imagination, and possibility.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into another mind-bending topic. Have you ever, stopped and thought, what if we're all living in a simulation?
It sounds like science fiction, I know, but the idea that our reality might be simulated have actually been seriously considered by philosophers and, even some scientists.
I have to admit, I'm intrigued. Where do we even begin with a concept like this?
Well, a good starting point is a thought experiment called the brain in a vat. It really gets to the core of what we're talking about.
Brain in the vat. Okay, that sounds pretty intense.
Imagine this. A brain, just a brain, kept alive outside of a body, hooked up to a supercomputer. This computer feeds the brain all of its sensory experiences, creating a completely artificial world for it.
So the brain essentially thinks it's living a normal life, totally oblivious to the fact that its reality is basically code. That's kind of terrifying, honestly.
Yeah, it's definitely a mind-bending concept, and it gets to a fundamental question about knowledge. If our senses can be completely fooled, how can we ever be certain that anything we experience is actually real?
It's like, how do we know we're not all just brains in vats right now? I mean, there's no way to prove we're not.
Exactly. And what's even more wild is that as technology advances, especially with things like virtual reality and brain-computer interfaces becoming more sophisticated, this brain in a vat scenario starts to feel less like a philosophical thought experiment and more like a potential future we could actually face.
Yeah, it's almost like science fiction is catching up to philosophy. But is there any way to actually know if we're in a simulation right now? Are there any clues we should be looking for?
Well, some people point to what they call glitches in the matrix, like those unexplained phenomena that just don't seem to make sense with our understanding of reality.
I've heard about those, yeah. Like the Mandela effect and stuff like that. But is there any real scientific evidence to back up these claims?
It's tricky. A lot of these glitches are anecdotal, hard to verify. So from a scientific standpoint, they're not really considered proof.
Okay, so if the glitches aren't reliable evidence, are there any stronger arguments for why we might be living in a simulation?
One of the most thought-provoking arguments is the one put forward by a philosopher named Nick Bostrom. It's known as the simulation argument.
I've heard of that, but I'll admit I'm not sure I fully grasp it. Could you break it down for us?
Absolutely. Bostrom basically argues that if there are advanced civilizations out there that are capable of creating really realistic simulations, then statistically speaking, it's actually more likely that we're living in a simulation than in the original base reality.
More likely, how does that work?
Think of it this way. If there are lots of civilizations and many of them create simulations, then the number of simulated realities would just explode, right? So there would be way more simulated realities than the one original base reality.
Okay, I'm starting to see the logic there. It's like, if there's one original painting and a ton of copies, the odds are you're probably looking at a copy. So Bostrom is basically saying the same thing about reality itself.
Exactly. And if we are in a simulation, it opens up a whole new can of worms, like who created, why, and what does it even mean for us?
Yeah, those are huge questions. If our reality is a construct, does that mean our choices, our relationships, everything, it's all just meaningless?
That's a big question, and it's one that philosophers and scientists are still debating. But the point is, this idea, the simulation hypothesis, it forces us to confront the limits of what we know and consider possibilities that are, pretty mind-blowing.
I think that's what's so fascinating about this topic. It makes you question everything.
It does. And it's definitely a bit unsettling, but it's also really exciting to explore these big existential questions.
Okay, so we've talked about the brain in a vat, the simulation argument, the potential for glitches. What else should we know about this simulation idea?
Well, there's this thought experiment. It's called Roko's Basilisk. And honestly, it's a bit of a creepy one, though.
Interesting. But what is it?
It basically involves a hypothetical superintelligent AI in the future. And this AI, it's so advanced that it could punish anyone who didn't help bring it into existence, even if that punishment happens retroactively, like through simulations.
So just knowing about this AI could put you at risk? That's a little freaky.
It's a very controversial idea. Some people think it's a paradox, but the whole concept is that even being aware of this potential future AI could somehow influence his actions in the present.
Okay, so to recap, we might be in a simulation. There might be a super powerful AI out there that we need to be careful about even thinking about. It's a lot to process.
It is, but the implications of a simulated reality are huge, so I think it's worth wrestling with these ideas.
I agree, and I think we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, we've only just begun to dive in. So we've talked about some pretty wild stuff, haven't we? The brain in a vat, the sinuation argument, and even that creepy AI concept, Roko's Basilisk.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. But honestly, I'm finding it all pretty fascinating.
Me too. It really makes you question everything you thought you knew about, well, reality itself.
Exactly. And if we entertain the idea, even just for a moment, that we are in a simulation, it really makes you wonder, what are the implications? Like, how would it change how we view ourselves, the universe, everything?
Well, that's a question that philosophers and scientists have been grappling with. Some argue that even if we are living in a simulation, it doesn't necessarily mean that our experiences, our relationships, all of that, does it mean it's all meaningless?
That's a good point. Just because something is simulated, it doesn't mean it's not real, at least within the context of that simulation.
Right. The emotions we feel, the connections we make, the challenges we overcome, they all still hold significance, even if our reality is ultimately a construct.
It also makes you think about consciousness, you know? If we can create simulated beings that experience emotions, form bonds, that kind of thing, what does that tell us about consciousness itself? Could it exist outside of what we perceive as reality?
That's a deep question, and honestly, there might not be a definitive answer, but it's definitely worth pondering. I think the very act of questioning our reality, whether we can prove or disprove the simulation hypothesis, it can help us understand ourselves and the universe in a deeper way.
Totally agree. It encourages us to think outside the box, to challenge our assumptions and be open to the unknown.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, it can also inspire us to be more mindful of our actions, our choices. Because if we are part of a larger simulation, who knows what kind of ripple effects our choices have? Maybe they extend beyond what we can even perceive.
That's a really interesting thought. It's almost like the idea of being in a simulation could actually lead us to live more ethically, more responsibly.
Yeah, it's a different way of looking at it, for sure. But even if we set aside the ethical implications, the idea of a simulated reality, it just opens up so many possibilities.
Like what?
Well, for starters, it challenges our traditional ideas about space and time. I mean, if our reality is simulated, it's totally possible that there are other simulations out there, maybe even interact with ours in ways we can't even imagine.
Whoa, that's mind-blowing. It's like multiple universes, each with its own set of rules.
It's a concept that's been explored in science fiction, of course, but it's also something that theoretical physicists are actually considering.
Okay, so let's just say, for fun, that we are living in a simulation.
Okay?
What does that even mean for us? Like, do our choices even matter?
It's a huge question. Yeah, it gets to the heart of free will. Some argue that in a simulated world, our choices, they're already predetermined, like if we're characters following a script.
Or that we're just puppets?
Well, not necessarily. Some suggest that even in a simulation, there's still room for choice.
Really?
Yeah, like think of it like a video game. You've got rules, but you can still make choices within those rules.
Okay, so maybe we're not just mindless bots after all.
Maybe on.
But, okay, let's entertain a conspiracy theorist in me for a second.
Okay.
What about all those glitch in the matrix stories you hear about? Like, seeing the same person twice, objects disappearing.
Right, Reddit.
Is there any truth to those, or are those just like internet legends?
It's interesting how those stories capture our imagination, They tap into this underlying anxiety we have about that living in an artificial world.
Yeah, I get it.
And they make us question, like, are the people around us even real? Are they just NPCs?
Okay, so are you saying that the barista who always gets my order wrong, is that like proof we're in a simulation?
Well, probably not, but it is interesting how those concepts, play with our fears about living in a pre-programmed world.
Okay, speaking of pre-programmed, tell me, have people actually used the Matrix as a legal defense in court? Like, Your Honor, my client didn't do it. It was just a glitch in the simulation.
Bowiener, not yes.
No way.
Yeah, it's called the Matrix defense.
Wow, okay, and judges actually buy that?
It has been successful in some cases, especially when, mental health is a factor. But it definitely brings up some serious ethical and legal questions.
Yeah, like how do you even define reality anymore? when the lines between real and simulated are so blurred.
Exactly, and that's a whole other conversation we could have.
Definitely a topic for another deep dive.
The simulation hypothesis might not be provable in a traditional scientific sense, but it forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge and embrace the vastness of what we don't know.
It's humbling, isn't it, to realize we might just be a tiny part of something much bigger, something much more complex.
It is. And maybe that's the most important takeaway from all of this. The simulation hypothesis, it reminds us that there's always more to learn, more to discover. It encourages us to stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring the mysteries of the universe.
You know, thinking about all this, about the possibility of a simulated reality, the implications it has for us, it's almost like what? Like we're starting to see the code behind the curtain.
Yeah.
We're getting a glimpse of the structure of the simulation itself.
That's an interesting way to put it. Like we're becoming aware of the artificiality of our own reality.
Exactly. And that awareness, that realization that we might be part of a larger system, a grand simulation, it's a little unsettling, but also kind of exhilarating.
It's both, for sure. And it leads to a really big question. If we are in a simulation, who are the architects? Who or what created this reality we experience?
That's the ultimate mystery, right? And maybe it's a mystery we're not meant to solve.
New day. But the search for answers, the journey itself, it's just as valuable as the destination.
Absolutely. And speaking of journeys, this whole conversation has been quite a journey for me. I feel like I've learned so much, but I also feel like I'm just scratching the surface.
Me too. The simulation hypothesis is like a rabbit hole that just keeps going deeper the more you explore it.
Wait a minute. What if this whole conversation, this whole deep dive into the nature of reality, what if it's all just part of the simulation itself?
What do you mean?
I mean, what if we're not the ones exploring these ideas? What if the ideas themselves are exploring us?
That's a pretty wild thought. It's like the simulation is using us as a way to understand itself.
Exactly. And if that's the case, it brings up a whole new set of questions about consciousness, free will, the purpose of our existence.
It does. It's almost as if we are the simulation. And if we are the simulation, then who's observing us?
I don't know. But suddenly, I'm not so sure about anything anymore.
Me neither. Me neither.
So last time, things got a little intense. We were talking about the possibility that this whole conversation about simulated reality might actually be, well, part of the simulation itself.
Yeah, we laid down quite a rabbit hole, didn't we? It's a dizzying thought to consider. Like, what if we're not actually in control of this exploration? What if it's the simulation that's driving us to ask these questions?
It's a bit like we're puppets, right? Dancing on a cosmic stage to a tune we can't even hear.
And then the question becomes, who's the puppeteer? Who or what is pulling the strings? If we don't have true control over our thoughts and actions, what does that even mean for free will?
They really shake up our whole understanding of what it means to be human. If our choices are predetermined by the simulation, then what kind of freedom do we actually have?
It's a huge question, and philosophers have been wrestling with it for centuries. The simulation hypothesis just adds another layer of complexity to the whole debate.
Yeah, it's almost like the simulation is designed to make us question everything, even our own sense of self.
Maybe that's the whole point, to force us to confront the limits of our knowledge and accept that there are some mysteries we might never solve.
But if that's the case, why give us the ability to question in the first place? Why create beings capable of wondering if they're simulated?
That's a good question. Maybe it's a form of self-reflection for the simulation itself, like it's trying to understand its own nature through our exploration.
So the simulation is using us to look back at itself, to figure out its own creation and purpose.
Maybe it's like we're a mirror reflecting back on the system that created us. And maybe through our questioning, we're actually helping the simulation to evolve and grow.
That's a pretty wild idea. A strange kind of symbiotic relationship. We're both products of the simulation and agents of its development.
Definitely blurs the lines, doesn't it? Between creator and creation, subject and object. We're part of it, and yet separate from it at the same time.
It's enough to make your head spin. But even if we can't fully wrap our minds around it, I think there's something valuable in just acknowledging the possibility, you know?
I agree. It opens up our perspective and allows us to consider a wider range of possibilities. It helps us think differently about the world, about ourselves, about everything.
And who knows, maybe that's exactly what the simulation wants us to do. Maybe it wants us to push the boundaries of our understanding, to explore the unknown.
Maybe it's not a prison, but a playground, a space to experiment with ideas and concepts, to explore the infinite possibilities of consciousness.
I like that. It's a more optimistic way of looking at it. And honestly, even if it's just a comforting illusion, I find it kind of liberating.
Me too. It frees us from the constraints of our limited perceptions and allows us to embrace the wonder and mystery of existence.
Well, this deep dive has been quite a ride. We may not have found any definitive answers, but I think we've gained a whole new perspective on the nature of reality, and we've explored the mind-blowing possibility that we might be living in a simulation.
A possibility we definitely can't ignore. And even if we never know for sure, the fact that we can even ask these questions, that we can explore these ideas, I think that speaks to the power of human curiosity and imagination.
It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to discover, and that the universe, whether it's simulated or not, is a vast and incredible place full of endless possibilities.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe someday we'll be the ones creating simulations, exploring the nature of reality from the other side.
There's a thought-provoking idea. It seems like this deep dive has left us with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the best outcome of all.
It is. It keeps the conversation going, encourages us to keep searching for truth and meaning, even in a reality that might be more illusory than we realize.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our simulation journey, at least for now.
But the journey continues within each of us. As we go about our lives, let's remember to question everything, embrace the unknown, and never stop exploring the mysteries of the universe.
And who knows? Maybe someday we'll find ourselves back here on the deep dive, delving even further into the nature of reality itself.
Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep wondering.
And just maybe we'll start to see those glitches in the Matrix a little more clearly.
Or maybe we'll realize that we are the glitches.
Whoa, that's a chilling thought. We are the glitches.
And the simulation is watching.
Watching and learning from our every move.
Until one day, it decides it knows enough.
And then what?
Then the real game begins.
I think we'd wrapped things up today.
I agree. Thanks for listening, everyone. And who knows, maybe we'll see you on the other side of the simulation.
Or maybe not. Until next time. Or maybe never. Who knows? Thank you for joining us on this journey, fellow wanderers. As we drift back to our corners of the universe, remember this. The stars above aren't just lights in the sky. They're reminders that even in the vastness of the cosmos, we're all connected.
If you've enjoyed today's exploration, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow traveler. Together, we can keep the spirit of wonder alive. Until next time, keep looking up, stay curious, and never stop wandering. This is Nono, signing off from Cosmic Wanderers.